So yesterday's news headlines saw rumours that Boris Johnson was going to sulk away, walk away from the EU negotiating table because they weren't capitulating to his demands on trade. They weren't offering him a good trade deal. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but being a left-wing Eurosceptic, I'm in something of a unique position here because I can see the argument for leaving the EU. I voted to leave the EU. In hindsight, a poor decision because I voted to leave the EU and give negotiations, give control of that exit to the Tories. Poor vote on my behalf, however I voted how I voted. And in a democracy, if you give a choice to the people, you have to abide by their choice. If you pose a question, you have to abide by their answer. It's the foundation of our democracy. Now, it's not, a referendum isn't legally binding. It is morally binding. If you want to keep people trusting in your democracy, you have to do what the people tell you they want you to do. It's just the way it is. It's the foundation of democracy. So the question of should we have a second referendum, I can see why people would want that. I really can. I can really see the argument for that. However, it does open the floodgate for what happens if we get the result we don't like in a second referendum. Do we get to ask for a third referendum, and then a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and it goes on and on and on? I can see where the Brexiteers are coming from in that respect as well. But in the campaign, in the run-up to the referendum, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, David, Jacob Rees-Mogg, they all told us that we would hold all the cards. We would completely control our own destiny when it comes to leaving the EU. They said that Berlin and other large capitals in Europe, Merkel, would be knocking at our door. Nigel Farage specifically said we would be in Berlin, not Brussels, the very next day after the referendum result came in, negotiating a new trade deal. It's on YouTube, you can look it up yourself. They said that we would hold all the cards to other countries. Australia would come running, America would come running, Japan. They said all these countries would come running to strike a new trade deal with us in the wake of leaving the EU. And it hasn't happened. The only country that has shown any sort of interest is America, and that could arguably be at the cost of our NHS. So it hasn't happened. So a question I want to put to you right-wing leavers out there, I understand your frustration. I understand you want to leave the European Union. You may want to leave for different reasons that I want to leave, that's fine. But let me ask you a question. All those times that Nigel Farage, David Davis, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, Gove, they said that we would hold all the cards. If we leave the EU, we have complete control. Other countries would jump and come running at the chance of a new trade deal with UK, with Britain, in the wake of the EU, in the wake of Brexit. Were they lying? Were they simply wrong? Or, if they're not lying, and they're not wrong, what is this hissy fit that I hear Boris Johnson is throwing? Because the EU won't capitulate. Now, I can understand why many people think it's the EU's fault. Many people will just blame EU for this mess. And the EU probably is contributing to this mess. They're probably dragging their heels, and they probably want to punish the UK a little bit for leaving. Because being a Eurosceptic, I do not think that the EU is perfect and divine and untouchable in the sense that many left-wing figures seem to believe it is. Many left-wing Euro sycophants seem to believe that the EU is holier than thou. It's saintly. It can't be touched. The EU is not a perfect institution. It is a capitalist institution. It is designed to make money for the rich at the behest of the poor. This is why I voted to leave. Not based on the campaign. I understand why many people would have voted based on the campaign, but I voted to leave based on my own personal principles. It's a supra-capitalist venture, and I think that should be diluted as much as possible. I think the only people that I want answerable to me is my government and my councils. I do not want some sort of supranationalist, super-capitalist, multinational venture getting involved. I want direct as possible democracy. I want to be able to vote for my councillors and vote them out if I don't like them. Vote for my government, vote them out if I don't like them. As it stands, there is an element of democracy in the form of MEPs in the European Union, but it is not as strong and not as direct as parliamentary democracy, as local democracy. And this is why I voted to leave. But however, many people will have been influenced by the promises made by Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, David Davis, Michael Gove, etc., will have been influenced in their vote by that. They will have believed that we would get £350 million a week into the NHS, which, by the way, we're still waiting for. They will have believed that America, Japan and Australia and Berlin would have come running to do a trade deal with the UK. They would have believed these things. I've personally spoken to people who voted Brexit, voted leave, based on that campaign, because they didn't know too much about the EU beforehand, and they looked at the campaign and they saw these promises being made and they thought, I'll vote for that. Now, you can call that naive if you want, you can call it idiotic, you can call it silly, but it's the way people voted and it's the reasons that they voted. Not everybody is like me and voted for what they voted for out of principle, out of pre-held beliefs, already formed opinions. Not everybody's like that. A lot of people will have known a little bit about the EU, not too much about the EU before the election, before the referendum, and they would have gone into the referendum having looked at the discussion. And this is where the Remain campaign fell on its face as well, because all they did was give you scary stories about what would happen if we leave the EU, what would crash and fail if we leave the EU, what would be the disasters, the fallout. They didn't issue a strong enough campaign on the benefits of remaining, and this is why not enough people voted to remain. This is why we ended up with a leave vote, because the Remain campaign wasn't strong enough on the benefits of staying in the EU, and the Leave campaign just made outrageous promises, and it worked. They promised hundreds of millions of pounds a week in the NHS. They promised every country would jump at the chance to do a trade deal. They appealed to the nostalgia and the sense of patriotism in the electorate, and they won. So, as dirty as the campaign was, as flawed as the campaign was, Leave won the day. We cannot be calling for a second referendum. We cannot be calling to rejoin the EU, as some people are. We have to abide by the Leave vote, because we voted to leave. That's all there is to it. Whenever you get an election and you get a dirty campaign, whoever wins, wins. You just have to wait until the next election and see how things play out. But the question I want to pose to you guys is, did Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, did they lie or were they wrong? That's the question. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.